Somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, a passenger on a flight from Tokyo to London looks up at the little map on the seatback in front of them, and the plane icon is pointing the wrong way. London is to the west. The aircraft is flying east, toward Alaska. It is not a glitch. The crew know precisely where London is. They are deliberately flying away from it, out across the Pacific, up over Alaska, along the frozen roof of Canada, before they will finally bend down toward Europe from the top of the world. That northern detour can add close to 3 hours of flying in each direction. It drags the journey toward 15 hours and burns thousands of extra dollars in fuel, all to fly, on purpose, away from where it's going. That backwards plane is the first crack in something almost nobody questions. The quiet belief that the line's aircraft trace across a map are roads, fixed, logical, drawn once and left alone. They are nothing of the kind. The path that Jet is carving right now was bent into the shape by sealed borders, by an invisible cage of circles drawn over open ocean, by a magnetic field that refuses to hold still beneath the runways themselves, and, before this is finished, by a force 93 million miles away that can wipe a flight path off the top of the planet in a matter of minutes. None of it appears on the map in the seatback. All of it is steering that aircraft. Start with the reason that Tokyo flight is flying east to go west, a single line on a political map, slammed shut. When Western nations sanctioned Russia, Russia answered by closing its airspace to most Western and Allied carriers. Overnight, the fastest corridor between Europe and East Asia, the great arc straight across Siberia, simply vanished for half the world's airlines. The planes did not get slower, the planet did not change shape. A door closed, and thousands of routes had to feel their way around the edges of a country they were no longer permitted to touch. You can watch the consequence in real time. Pull up a live flight tracker and follow 2 jets leaving Europe for nearly the same corner of East Asia. A Lufthansa aircraft swings far to the south, a long, sagging curve that piles on hundreds of extra miles. An Air China aircraft, bound for almost the identical patch of ground, drives a clean, straight stroke directly across Siberia. Same destination. 2 completely different shapes on the screen. The difference between those 2 lines has nothing to do with weather, nothing to do with the airplanes, nothing to do with distance. China never sanctioned Russia, so Chinese carriers still slice across Russian skies exactly the way everyone did before 2022, while Western airlines fly 1 to 3 hours longer to go the long way around. The weirdness on that map is not physics. It is a geopolitical fault line, traced in jet fuel at 35,000 feet. If a closed border can warp a route that violently, you would expect borders to be the whole story. They are barely the beginning, because the next force bending these lines is not war. It is a bill. Every nation owns the sky directly above it, all the way up, and every nation charges rent on it. Fly a jet across a country's airspace, and that country sends an invoice, an overflight fee, for the privilege of passing through. The rates are wildly uneven from one border to the next, a patchwork of tolls strung across the entire planet that no passenger ever sees. And the numbers get large enough that the math sometimes wins. An airline will look at a direct path that clips an expensive stretch of sky, look at a slightly longer path that skirts it, and choose the longer one, because the extra fuel costs less than the toll. So that gentle, inexplicable kink in a route, the one that seems to swerve around nothing at all, is occasionally not a navigation decision. It is an accounting decision. The plane is dodging a charge you will never find printed on your ticket. Money pushes the line one way. The atmosphere shoves it another. 7 miles above the ground, a river of air called the jet stream tears across the planet from west to east, faster than any car on a freeway. It is invisible, it is relentless, and pilots treat it like moving water. Flying east with the current, they steer straight into it and let it hurl them along, picking up free speed for nothing. Flying west against it, they twist and weave to slip around its strongest cores, because punching head-on into a 200-mile-an-hour wall of air burns fuel they cannot spare. That is why a flight east and the very same flight back west do not trace the same line on the map, and why the same trip can run more than an hour shorter in one direction than the other. The strange wiggle in a long-haul track, the one that looks like the pilot got bored and started doodling, is an aircraft chasing a wind it cannot see, riding it like a raft. Push out over the North Atlantic. and the situation stops being strange and becomes almost unreal. Out there, between North America and Europe, in the busiest stretch of oceanic sky on Earth, there are no permanent roads at all. The lanes that the great river of transatlantic traffic pours through every day, the organized track system, are not painted onto the world and left there. They are drawn fresh, then erased, then drawn again. Twice a day. One set of lanes is published for the overnight wave of flights racing east toward Europe, positioned to sit inside the night's best tailwinds. Then those lanes are deleted, and an entirely new set is published for the daytime wave streaming west toward America, shifted to a different patch of sky for a different wind. The highway a plane followed across the ocean last night does not exist this morning. It was rolled up and thrown away, and a new one was laid down in a different place, and tomorrow that one will be gone too. The map you trust to be a map is being rewritten under the aircraft while it flies. And even those temporary lanes are not free to go wherever the wind suggests. Out over that open water, far from any runway, a colder calculation takes over and starts bending the line again. Most of these long ocean crossings are flown by twin-engine jets, 2 engines and only 2, which raises a question the entire route is built to answer. If one of those engines dies in the middle of nowhere, how far is the nearest place to land? The rule that governs this is called ETOPS, and it draws an invisible leash on every twin-engine aircraft. The plane is forbidden from ever being more than a set number of minutes of flying time away from somewhere it could put down on a single engine. The most capable modern certification, ETOPS 330, stretches that leash to 330 minutes, 5.5 hours from the nearest runway on one engine. Picture the consequence drawn onto the ocean. Around every lonely diversion airport, a strip in Greenland, a field in the Azores, a speck of rock in the empty Pacific, sits an enormous invisible circle, the zone a crippled jet could still limp into in time. And the route is not allowed to leave the chain of those circles. So instead of flying the true shortest line, the aircraft bows deliberately toward each lonely outpost in turn, hugging the inside edge of one invisible bubble until it can reach into the next. The curve in that ocean track is the shape of a survival plan. It is the line a plane flies so that, if everything goes wrong over the most hostile water on the planet, there is always a runway it can still reach before the fuel runs out. Back over solid land, the sky is doing the opposite of opening up. It is clamping shut. With Russia sealed off to the north and a spread of conflict zones smoldering to the south, an enormous share of all Europe to Asia traffic is being funneled through a single narrow throat of airspace, the Caucasus Corridor, the sliver of sky over Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. At its tightest point, this corridor carrying a meaningful slice of the planet's long-haul flights is only about 100 miles wide, threaded between Russian airspace on one side and Iranian airspace on the other. 100 miles. For a major aircraft, that is minutes. And the pressure on that throat is not theoretical. When Iran abruptly shut its own skies in June of 2025, the traffic had to go somewhere, and Azerbaijan alone absorbed around 110 extra flights in a single day, dumped onto it without warning. An entire hemisphere's worth of aviation, squeezing through a gap you could drive across in under 2 hours, held open only by the fragile fact that the countries on either side of it have not yet closed their doors too. So, the sky lies. Then comes the part that should not be possible. The ground lies too. Look at the giant numbers painted at the end of any runway in the world. They are not arbitrary names. Each one is a compass heading, the direction that strip of concrete points, measured against magnetic north, rounded off and stripped down to 2 digits, which means those numbers are only true as long as magnetic north stays put. It does not. The magnetic North Pole is not a fixed dot at the top of the Earth. It is a wandering thing, generated by molten metal churning in the planet's core, and right now it is drifting towards Siberia, sliding across the Arctic by more than 30 miles in a single year. As it crawls, the magnetic heading of every runway on Earth shifts a hair with it. Most of the time, the drift is too small to matter, but every so often a runway's true heading creeps far enough that it no longer rounds to the number painted on it, and the airport is forced to act. In 2021, Austin's airport renamed a runway from 17L/35R to 18L/36R. Not 1 inch of that concrete moved. The pavement sat exactly where it had always sat. The planet's magnetic field had simply slid out from under it, far enough that the old number had quietly become a lie, and crews arrived with paint to correct a sign the Earth itself had falsified. Closer to the pole, the lie accumulates faster. Fairbanks, up in Alaska, has to renumber its runways roughly every 24 years, repainting reality to keep pace with a pole that will not stop walking. And if you follow that pole far enough north, the deception gets so severe that the entire system the planes navigate by simply breaks. Out at Resolute Bay, deep in the Canadian Arctic, the magnetic field is so distorted, so close to the wandering pole, that a compass becomes nearly worthless. The local variation between where the needle points and where true north actually lies exceeds 30 degrees. So, the airport gave up on magnetism altogether. Its runways are labeled 17T and 35T. That T is the tell. It means the numbers are measured against true north, the real geographic top of the planet, because the magnetic version of north is too unreliable to trust your aircraft to. Most travelers have never once seen a letter where a runway designation should end. A small painted confession at the edge of the inhabited world that the compass we all assume is bedrock simply stops working up there. Closed borders, hidden tolls, vanishing roads, survival bubbles, a magnetic field that mislabels the very runways planes land on. By now, the comfortable idea that flight paths are tidy lines on a map should be thoroughly dead. But there is one more force out there, and it is the reason that Tokyo passenger, watching their plane fly the wrong way over the Pacific, is closer to the edge of the known world than they could possibly imagine. The route across the very top of the planet, the polar shortcut over the Arctic that saves hours between continents, runs through a place where the ordinary tools of flight fall away. Up there, near the pole, the normal radio systems that keep an aircraft tethered to the ground cannot reach. The curve of the Earth gets in the way. So, polar flights fall back on an older, longer-range technology. HF radio, high-frequency signals that bounce off the upper atmosphere to leap across the curve of the world and keep the cockpit in contact with someone, anyone, far below. And HF radio has a single, devastating weakness. It depends on the upper atmosphere staying calm. 93 million miles away, the sun does not care about your flight schedule. When it convulses, when it hurls a storm of charged particles out across space, and that storm slams into the top of the Earth's atmosphere, it can light up the polar sky and black out HF radio completely. In an instant, the one lifeline keeping a polar flight in contact with the ground goes dead. A solar storm the crew cannot see, erupting on a star they will never reach, reaches down across all that emptiness and severs an aircraft's voice over the most desolate ice on the planet. And so, the airlines run from it. When the sun stirs, polar flights are pulled off the top of the world and shoved south, sometimes mid-flight, abandoning the shortcut and the hours it saves, because no amount of saved fuel is worth flying blind and silent over the pole. The line on the map, the one that looks so permanent, gets dragged hundreds of miles by a flare on the surface of the sun. And even when the storm holds off and the route stays open, the price of crossing the top of the world is still being paid, quietly, by the people up there. Strip away the atmosphere's shielding near the poles, and the cosmic radiation pouring in from deep space comes through stronger. It is real enough and steady enough that the dose absorbed by pilots and flight attendants on those high polar runs is formally tracked, flight by flight, year by year. An invisible exposure accumulating in the bodies of the crew, the cost of every hour spent on the shortcut across the roof of the world. That is the system the passenger over the Pacific is suspended inside, watching a plane icon point the wrong way and assuming it must be a mistake. It is not a mistake. It is the only visible edge of a machine that bends every flight on Earth around closed borders and hidden tolls, around winds it chases and survival circles it dares not leave, around magnetic poles that mislabel the ground, and a sun that can sever a cockpit's last voice from 93 million miles away. The lines were never roads, they never sat still, and the next time one of them looks wrong on the little screen, it is not the map that has failed to understand the world. It is you finally seeing it.